Welcome to Serious Business, and today I'm with Victorian Senate candidate for the Australian Sex Party, Dr. Meredith Doig, who's also the president of the Rationalist Society of Australia. How did you go the path from Rationalist Society to Sex Party?
Well, before the last federal election, the Rationalist Society did what we called a secular scorecard. So we had a look at a number of different political parties and the public pronouncements of their leaders, and we scored their policies against what we called our sort of manifesto, if you like. We call it our 10-point plan for a secular Australia. And lo and behold, there were two parties that came out with sort of AAA ratings, and one of them was the Secular Party of Australia, which I guess you would expect, but the other was the Sex Party. And that really alerted me to the fact that the policies of the Sex Party overlap almost 100% with the 10-point plan for a secular Australia. And through that, I really started paying a lot more attention to the Sex Party, and then got to know Fiona, and so for the last few years we've been friends, and that's how it all started.
Now you're not what voters may expect from a Sex Party candidate with very, very extensive business background.
No, I suppose that's true, and I think possibly there's a bit of method in the madness when the Sex Party approached me and we had conversations about whether or not I'd like to be a candidate. And I think it's because really the Sex Party is growing up. Only been in existence for about 6 years, done amazing things in that 6 years, and of course Fiona has been a remarkably effective politician in her own right in the upper house of the Victorian Parliament. But I think what they really want to do, and what we want to do now, is to show to voters that the Australian Sex Party is maturing. And that means that it can appeal to a much broader range of people like me. My politics traditionally have been pretty middle of the road, and I've been around politics a lot. I have been a member of political parties before, although not recently. And I think it shows that somebody with an extensive businessing background and in governance, I've been, for the last 15 years, I've been more or less a professional company director, and I've been on government boards, on university councils and on commercial boards. But what it shows is that people like me, who have a broad experience of life, can still recognise in the policies of the Sex Party a set of policies which are really oriented towards bringing Australia into the 21st century and being future oriented and being also youth oriented. I've got a lot of faith in I'm very optimistic about the youth of Australia. But I think to turn that optimism into reality, you really need to have the sort of policies that are going to invest in young people, and that's the sort of thing that I recognise in the policies of the Sex Party.
Now, the Sex Party is very socially progressive in policies. What would you say the party stands for?
Well, I'd summarise it in this way. I reckon that the Sex Party is socially progressive, economically prudent, and environmentally rational. That's how I'd summarise that. It's like a sort of triple bottom line: social, economic, environmental policies.
One of the big changes, one of the big challenges at the moment in just Australian society and politics is the changes that are coming in the workforce, in the jobs of the future.
Yep.
And we've got different views that would appear in Canberra about education and science funding and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's your views on how we prepare ourselves for the changes that are coming in?
The jobs of the future?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, obviously it's got a lot to do with what we do in our schools and how we prepare young people for the skills that they're going to need in a much more electronically oriented world, in a digital age. I know there's been talk about mandating or ensuring that kids learn coding in schools, for example, and of course that's a bit of a no-brainer, because to me that's the language of the digital age. Whether or not everybody has to learn the same sorts of computer languages Probably not. There's probably some fundamental ones, and then, like most things, there would be languages that people who really like that sort of stuff, they can specialise in. But we would be in favour of education policies that invest in the capacity for young people to really be skilled, to have the facility to move easily around the digital world in the future.
Now, the Sex Party was the first party to call for an R18 plus rating. How do you think that's gone, and the position at the moment on censorship and wider discussion about that?
Well, it seems to me that you really need a bit of common sense in this. From my understanding, there have been decisions by the classification board which have been pretty draconian in not even giving a classification to some video games on the basis of a particular scene that showed, what was it, anal
probing.
Anal probing, that's what it was.
First time I've ever said it on TV.
and yet, it was in a South Park video game, and it was obviously meant in a humorous way. But what they did, I thought, was actually very clever, and that is that they just put a card instead showing a koala crying, and in pointing out the fact that this particular part of the game had been censored. So it's a clever way of dealing with it. But from a first principles point of view, it seems to me that you've got to be really careful with classification systems, that they've got to be interpreted with a degree of discretion. So if you're trying to use these systems in a very hard and fast, black and white, rule-based way, you're going to get some silly decisions. So the classifications need to be considered in context. So scenes like that have to be considered in the context of the whole game and what was actually intended, the tone of it. So it seems to me that from a general point of view, the Sex Party stands for, let's treat adults like adults. That means responsibly. And it implies that we also need to treat children like children. What I mean by that is if you allow adults to view material which is very diverse and may have a range of sex or sexual content to it, you do have to, at the same time, protect children from the possibility of exploitation or exposure to something which may not be age appropriate. That also implies that you really need to educate children with very good and modern sex and relationships education in schools, right from primary school up to the end of secondary school. And that's a way of preparing them to be responsible adults, to know what it means, to know what consent means, to have a sense of bodily integrity, and to be able to take their positions as adults in an adult world with responsibility. So that's, I guess, in summary, we would say treat adults like adults, but at the same time treat children like children, and that is protect them and prepare them to be adults and to have fun being adults at the same time.
Now, the economy is a big issue. The main parties like to talk about it, so is the media. What practical measures is the Sex Party going to do in regards to that?
Yeah, we've got a couple of ideas that we'd like to put before the Australian people. One of them is about the cost of religion. It's a little bit uncertain how much religion is costing this country because there's not really good data on it. Religious organisations don't have to submit financial data like companies or other not-for-profits. So it's a little bit uncertain how much, but we're pretty confident that if we could just remove the tax exemption from religious organisations, that would make a contribution to the economy. I hesitate to say, or hasten to say, that what we're not saying is removing tax exemptions from things like church schools or church hospitals. but they get charity status under advancement of education or advancement of health. You know, things like St Vincent de Paul, they get charity status under welfare organisations. But there are a lot of organisations that just have a charity status because they are advancing religion. And in this day and age, for heaven's sake, I mean, what's religion? Well, religion is belief in the supernatural. So we're giving tax breaks to organisations that are advancing belief in the supernatural. It just doesn't make sense in this day and age. So that's one thing that we think really could very reasonably be eliminated from the tax scene in Australia. The other one, which is fairly obvious, and given that both parties are now agreed that you should put up the taxes on tobacco, well, we say there's another area where you could have government taxes, and that's on cannabis. Why not legalise, grow cannabis, regulate it, and tax it? It's another income stream for the government, and it actually would it'd be much easier to assure the quality of cannabis rather than, you know, potentially having questionable quality coming in from all over the place. So there's two suggestions that we'd make to contribute to the tax take.
Thank you very much, Meredith, for joining us. Now,
thank you, Jared.
One last question. Now, the $5 note, we saw the new one the other day, and the Queen was on it. Who do you reckon should be on if the Queen wasn't on the $5 note?
Oh. You know who I'd really like to see on it? The first woman to found a political party in Australia, Fiona Patten. And if not her, Luitja O'Donoghue, I think, a really respected elder amongst the First Peoples of Australia.